Welcome to Resilient Earth Radio, where we host speakers from the United States and around the world to talk about critical issues facing our planet and the positive actions people are taking. I'm Leanne Lindsay, producer and host, along with my co-producers and co-hosts, Scott and Tree Mercer of the Mindanoma Whale and Seal Study. We talk about nature-based economies that help rebalance Earth and raise awareness about the value of whales, elephants, mangroves, seagrass, the deep seas, waterways, and forests. This awareness could lead to new laws, policies, and procedures to help protect these valuable resources and encourage economies around them to replace the existing exploitation of oceans, forests, and animals. So please, donate today and share this wherever you can. Your contribution will help us here at Resilient Earth Radio and Podcast continue talking about the critical issues and positive actions. Produced in association with Planet-Centric Media, Seastorm Studios. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram and wherever you get your podcasts. In this episode, we catch up with Captain Paul Watson, who is talking to us from his houseboat across from the Louvre in Paris, France, about his time at the recent UN Ocean Conference in Nice, France, where he met with several island dignitaries and French President Emmanuel Macron. And we ask him about a few things, such as the whaling efforts that have halted in Iceland, his thoughts on deep-sea mining, an update about the High Seas Treaty that occurred during the Ocean Conference, and about overfishing of krill around the planet. Captain Paul is a renowned marine wildlife conservation and environmental activist who's best known for co-founding Greenpeace and founding the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society. In 2022, he stepped down from Sea Shepherd to co-found the Captain Paul Watson Foundation, with ongoing support by Sea Shepherd France and Brazil to continue his lifelong dedication to protecting marine life and their habitats. He's authored several books, the most recent, a children's book called We Are the Ocean. He has 2 young children who live with him in Paris, along with their mother and his wife, Jana Rusinovich, whom he married on Valentine's Day in 2015. The last time we spoke was January of this year, just after he'd been released from a Greenland prison near the end of December 2024. You can hear all about that experience from that January episode. In this one, we're talking about more recent events and what's on deck next for this intrepid ocean warrior. Thanks for listening to Resilient Earth Radio and Podcast. I'm Leanne Lindsay. We'll get into our show right after this word from our sponsor, The Catch.
Small fish off the coast of West Africa are being scooped up in large numbers and ground into fish meal. That's then sent all over the planet to feed other fish, like the farm salmon you get at your local grocery store. It's all part of a global supply chain that has some people crying foul.
Here is a case where the communities lose their fish, their food security, and they don't see any dollars coming in.
That's coming up on the latest season of The Catch. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back, Captain Paul. It's really wonderful to see you again.
Well, thank you.
And also Scott and Tree Mercer are here.
Hello, Paul.
Good morning.
We were very impressed with the attendance that happened at the United Nations Ocean Conference. You gave a talk. You had several meetings with dignitaries, including President Macron. And we want to hear about that. We want to hear about what's happening in Iceland with the pause on whaling. And we'd like to hear too about the overfishing of krill and also what can be done about deep sea mining. Deep sea mining is a topic that we actually have covered recently. So, why don't we get underway with how it was to be at the conference in Nice, France, and what transpired?
Well, I've been attending UN conferences, beginning in 1972 with the UN conference on the environment in Stockholm. And then I attended the one in Rio de Janeiro in 92 and the COP31 in Paris. And generally, I'm not very enthusiastic about these UN conferences because they never really seem to accomplish much. Every promise they make never comes true, and it's usually just a photo opportunity for world leaders to pretend that they're doing something. So I have to. This one here, I didn't go into it with a lot of, expectations, but I was, encouraged by a couple things. One is that the mayor of Nice, who's a very big supporter of ours, and he came up with the idea of inviting mayors from around the coastal cities of the world. And then we had this big dinner with all these mayors because he believes that, that's where real effective action takes place is on the local level, on the municipal level, more than on state and federal levels. And so that was very successful. And at that dinner, I was actually sat down between. They put the mayor of Reykjavik right beside me, and it was really funny because at first they were trying to get me to sit at another table because they didn't want to sit me beside her, but then she said no, it's fine, and so she sat there. She's very, very enthusiastic, very supportive, and she's very much against whaling, so that was good. And then the next day she did a tour of our ship, which is in the harbor. Less than 50% of the people in Iceland are support whaling. So in the government, both in Reykjavik and the government nationally in Iceland is opposed to whaling. So, we've come a long ways over the years. So most people in Iceland are now anti-whaling. So she certainly was a reflection of that. I had lunch with the president of French Polynesia, who had been very supportive when I was in Greenland, and we talked about different conservation issues that have to be addressed in the South Pacific. Had an hour-long meeting with the environment minister for Brazil, and a half-hour meeting with the First Lady of Brazil. Yeah, I guess President Lula was a little busy, but then I did the TV show with President Macron.
Here's a quick clip from that French TV show during the United Nations Ocean Conference, where he sits down with President Macron and other dignitaries, along with a couple of news channel crew.
Le capitaine Paul Watson.
And we see him walking across the stage and being introduced to the president. They shake hands, they sit down, and then the question is asked if Captain Paul has met Macron before. To which he replies, yes,
Bonsoir.
we have.
Vous connaissez Emmanuel Macron, Paul Watson?
We met, yes.
Oui, on s'est rencontrés, oui.
And then we see Macron engaging very friendly with Captain Paul and talking into the mic and to the audience. This back and forth engaged conversation went on for about 12 minutes. And now we get back to the conversation with Captain Paul.
That reached about 4 million people. So we did about 15 minutes on TV during that, where we talked about all these issues.
Captain Paul also met with Panama's Environment Minister Juan Carlos Navarro, and they focused on issues like deep sea mining, overfishing, and the High Seas Treaty.
So overall, it was, this is the first meeting where I actually got to meet some of these people, talk to them. And but the most important thing out of the conference was the fact that when the conference began, there was only 28 countries that had ratified the High Seas Treaty, and they needed 60 for ratification. And by the end of the conference, they had secured 64 countries that had ratified it. Of course, the United States didn't ratify it, but the major countries like France and Chile and Brazil and others did. Japan, no. Australia, no. But that's good because the High Seas Treaty helps us. We already have the United Nations World Charter for Nature to help us when we intervene, and this also gives us further justification and legitimacy to intervene. So that was probably the best thing that came out of the conference.
And what exactly will this High Seas Treaty actually accomplish, do you feel?
Well, it's supposed to mean that there's going to be enforcement of the international laws and regulations. I don't know if that's going to happen. What it does mean is that if we go in and intervene, and then we can use that as a defense for our intervention, say in a court of law. Now, back in 1993, when I chased Spanish drag trawlers off the Grand Banks of Newfoundland, and I was put on trial in Canada for a week, and my defense was the UN World Charter for Nature. And at the trial, Canada brought in, they spent $3 million trying to convict me on this thing. There's 3 counts of mischief. The mischief is what they charge you when they can't figure out anything else real to charge you with. I didn't damage any property, didn't hurt anybody, didn't steal anything. It was just you could have hurt somebody, you could have damaged property. That's what mischief is all about. But anyway, I cited the UN Charter for Nature, and they brought in a law professor from the University of Toronto to say, well, the UN Charter for Nature has no application under Canadian law. And the judge said, well, did Canada sign this or not? And she said, yeah, but Canada signs a lot of things. And so he said, well, to the jury, well, you're going to have to take that under advisement. And so that was my defense, and I was acquitted on all of those charges. So the High Seas Treaty will give us a even more additional defense for if we go in and we disrupt something, we get arrested, we go to court, either whether a civil or a criminal thing, we can use that as a defense for intervention. More and more judges are beginning to realize and understand and to make decisions that people have a right to intervene as a form of self-defense, really, on environmental issues. And that's going to become more and more of a case.
And what was that meeting with the Polynesian president? What were the types of things you discussed?
Well, the president of French Polynesia is Tahitian, and his party is one that's seeking independence from France. So he's like so he's very popular for that reason. Well, we talked because French Polynesia has created all these marine protection areas, and so he's interested in seeing that's enforced. We're very concerned about illegal fishing by foreign fishing operations off the Marquesas. In fact, last year I was invited by people in the Marquesa to do something about it. So he was very supportive of that. So of us getting involved and that. So we'll have the support of the government of in Tahiti for anything that we do in the future.
What do you think will really come from this conference? And describe.
Honestly,
Go ahead.
honestly, not much.
Yeah.
But you pick what you can out of that, you can use it. But they spent 38 million euros to host this conference, which they talk a lot. I think Greta Thunberg thumbed up the climate change conferences with its blah 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 blah. That's really all it. But we are looking at going at the COP30 conference, which is the only reason I'm interested in doing that is that it's going to be held in Belém in Brazil. And I've been invited by Chief Raoni of the Kayapo people and also by President Lula da Silva. So, that's worthwhile going there. We're going to bring our ship there on our way to doing the krill campaign. So we'll go to Belém and then go from there down to do the krill campaign. We're also looking at the possibility of going up the Amazon for 1,000 miles to Manaus and bringing many of the native chiefs back down the river. But that's a little up in the air because the pilotage fees to do that is about $300,000. So that might be, a little too much. But we got the government's arranged for us to have a free berth in Belém. So it's worthwhile doing that. And on the way, we're looking at intervening against illegal fishing or poaching off of in the waters of French Guiana. And so that's just something to do on the way. And then when we leave, we want to show up and oppose the seismic testing off the coasts of Uruguay. And then from there, we'll go down to the Southern Ocean.
And what year is that?
At the end of this year.
Oh, end of this year. Good.
Yeah, the COP30 conference is in November.
Okay.
We just had a recording with Michael Stalker of the Ocean Conservation Research, who studies sounds in human-generated sounds in the ocean. And the seismic testing, that is such a huge impact on marine life. I'm glad that you guys will be going. Now, where was that again that you're going to be doing that part?
off the coast of Uruguay, south of Brazil. Yeah,
Now, who is doing that testing?
oil companies.
Oh,
We've been really following this offshore drilling for oil companies here in the United States. Our whole administration's behind it, this crazy administration. But the deep sea mining, the reasons behind that, the companies that are getting heavily funded now, like the metals company out of Vancouver and one out of San Jose, Impossible Metals, among many others who are just gearing up to go plunder the Clarion-Clipperton Zone. And I know that you've said some things about that. So I want to touch on that, but I want to get back to the krill part as well.
We do want to intervene against deep sea mining and looking at this and specifically the metal company and specifically the Clipperton area, but they're not going to be doing anything until next year. So we'll be ready to intervene next year when they show up.
Excellent.
This is interesting with deep sea mining because strangely enough, I've been involved in it since 1977. I was there in Honolulu when the Sedco 245 arrived with the first cargo of manganese nodules, and Inco had brought them up for the deep, and so I was there to watch these manganese nodules, and I interviewed the president of the mining company at the time, and actually I was quite encouraged at the time because they said they had no intention of actually going after them, and he predicted nobody's going to touch these things for at least 50 years. Well, that was 50 years ago, but the reason that he said that was because he said they didn't want the competition for their mining operations on land, and the other thing that was in opposition to it, strangely enough, is the Pentagon, because they're concerned that the sediment, the pollution from deep sea mining will have an adverse effect on sonar for their submarine operations and that. So they're very much opposed to it. But I don't think people really understand just how damaging this is because you're going down 1-2 miles to the seabed floor to pull these little potato-sized rocks. Now, how those potato-sized rocks were formed is from over 200 million years of particulate matter falling down into the bottom, and then it's all sort of crystallizes into these things. And so what it's doing is it's leaching gold, manganese, nickel, cobalt, all get in there. So what they want to do is pull these up and then, melt them down and get those traces of metal, but we need a lot to really get a substantial return on that. But okay, you go down there and you're starting to mess up with an complete ecosystem, which is there's a lot of various species that are involved in that ecosystem. So you're going to screw that up on the bottom floor. You're going to put lights into an environment where none of these living things even know anything about lights. Incredible noise where they're not going, it's going to be very disruptive on the benthic level. But once you get those nodules up to the surface and you start loading them on, that means washing all the sediment off, all that mud, and that goes back into the ocean. Now, oceanographers have estimated it could take anywhere from 3 to 6 years for that mud to reach the bottom again, because it would slowly and it would spread out in clouds over hundreds of square miles. Now, as it's doing that, it's going to be leaching oxygen out of the ocean water, and of course suffocating fish populations as a result. And when it does reach the bottom, it's going to be a blanket of silt, which is going to cover the benthic life that's down there. So it's an extremely, extremely destructive industry. But most people aren't really aware of how destructive it is. And of course, Trump made his announcement that, oh yeah, I'll give you the green light on deep sea mining, but he has no idea. Well, he doesn't care really. All he's concerned, hey, might kill a bunch of sharks. That's good news, isn't it? That's the way he thinks.
Anything to be extractive and make money.
Yeah.
And that's a 3D column of life. That's another aspect of it that Richard Charter has really pointed out, and a lot of the times we've talked with him. And it's true, it impacts the entire column of life. The sediment
spreads across the entire ocean.
Wow.
And the lights and the noise, that too is so disruptive of that life down there. I think Dr. Sylvia Earle has talked about that too.
That was the
So
other thing at the Ocean Conference. I got time. I spent a bit of time with Sylvia Earle at a couple of the conferences, especially on deep sea mining. We did a conference together on that.
Oh,
that's
nice.
great. She's in that documentary that the Ocean Foundation did on Defend the Deep. They did that last year. They, in advance. So it's like very apropos now.
Yeah.
And so let's shift gear just a second and go to krills,
Okay.
overfishing of krill and what's behind that. And also, I want to include how the seabeds are being trawled and scraped. So I'd like to get your thoughts on both of those things.
Well, the one great thing about David Attenborough's film is that it really, showed that the trawlers and how destructive they were on the bottom. I had a few. I actually went to see that film at UNESCO's office here in Paris, and I had an opportunity to question the director because I was a little concerned about that film because David, for all the good he's done, he actually said, well, a great success story is a moratorium on whaling in 1986, and the whales are. And I had to point out, 50,000 whales had died since that so-called moratorium that was put in there, and whaling still continues. And the other, but they didn't really mention seabed mining in the film either. And they didn't, there's a lot of things that weren't, but to be fair, there's only so much you can put in a film, I guess. But
I
but anyway,
noticed that too about what he said. I watched it just the other night and
yeah.
saw the same thing. But David Attenborough, I have to say, when I studied him in college, he's the one who first got me down this path to really look at the environment and understand it better.
Well, he's a great educator. I
He
mean,
is.
following in the footsteps of Jacques Cousteau, they were both great educators, and that certainly has a very important role in this movement. So yeah, it was great. It was a good film in that respect. I just had a problem with the whaling issue because he was tending to give this idea that, well, the whales are safe, we don't have to do anything.
Not true.
Well, at least in Iceland right now, there is a pause, which is good to hear. I hope it lasts.
Well, I think it's more
And
than just a pause because, first of all, the day we showed up in 2023 was the day they called the moratorium there. Then last year, when we were on our way to Iceland, they canceled it again. And this year, when we were in Dublin ready to go, they canceled again. So that's 3 years in a row. I think that it's going to end. And the other operation, there's a minke whale operation. He just gave it up and he's selling his boat right now. So that boat's for sale for 60,000 euros right now with the harpoon. In fact, I was
yay.
thinking buy it. I'd buy the whaling boat so I could go hunt whalers with the harpoon. But the Lofson is the one man who's responsible for this, and he's 81 years old. And I don't know why he does this. He's the wealthiest man in Iceland. But he's very influential. So what you have is the government of the Iceland, and the majority of people are opposed to it, but he continues to get his permits and continues to push it because he's got a lot of influence. But I think it may be over. We'll watch it very closely, but I think that's pretty much the end for Icelandic whaling. It could be wrong, but I just don't see the enthusiasm on the part of the Icelandic people to carry on with it. So, Norway is now actually the biggest whaling nation. They kill more whales than Japan. But the Japanese are targeting fin whales and sei whales and everything, and the Norwegians are going after minke whales, which are a little more common. But still, the problem with interfering with Norwegian whaling is that it's like dozens of little small boats up and down the coast where it's not like going after a whaling fleet. And we went after them in '92 and '94. We sunk 6 of them, and the reason we sank them was we weren't going to be that really effective against it, but as a result of the sinking them, they had to get war insurance, and their insurance premiums went up considerably, and still are because we're always right there lurking behind the scenes saying, "Hey, we might go after your boats," and they might not take us seriously, but the insurance companies do. So
I
that's where
finally got to watch Whale Wars the other few months ago, right after our conversation with you in January.
you hadn't seen it before.
No, I hadn't. And
Oh.
so it was a revelation for me, and it was great to see the action and the activity and the time and effort that it took. That's Captain Paul Watson, former star of Whale Wars, also co-founder of Greenpeace, the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society, and now the Captain Paul Watson Foundation, who's been talking to us from his boat near the Louvre in Paris about his time and talks at UNOC, the United Nations Ocean Conference in Nice, France, this past June. From French President Macron to environmental ministers from places like Brazil and Panama, leaders from islands like French Polynesia, and he's been reflecting on his life as an environmentalist for the past 50 years. I'm Leanne Lindsay of Planet Centric Media and Seastorm Studios, along with my co-hosts and co-producers Scott and Tree Mercer of the Mendonoma Whale and Seal Study here on the Mendocino and Sonoma coast of Northern California. Now back to our conversation with Captain Paul Watson. So Norway is doing more whaling than Japan is, which is actually significant.
Yeah, they're killing
Japan's still doing it.
whales. But Japan's going after more endangered whales.
Mm-hmm.
There's the distinction.
That's what made Iceland so egregious. Was Iceland's only target was fin whales, which were endangered.
What vessel are you on now?
This is
This is a Peniche, which is like a houseboat. We're on the Seine, right?
I missed the first few minutes of you, so I missed that. But you can't miss the portholes behind you.
Yeah, we're right across from the Louvre, actually, on the river.
Nice.
very nice.
Which, by the way, for the first time in 100 years, there's now swimming in the Seine.
Really? Wow.
It's one good thing that came out of the Olympics.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah, they had
Okay,
to
so
clean up-
I'm
they had to-
clueless. Why was there no swimming in the Seine?
Well, because it's dirty.
That's what I thought. Okay, that was my guess.
But they cleaned it up so they could do this, the swimming, the marathon swimmings and everything.
Yeah.
They had to do that and was in the
Right.
in the river. So, and so the mayor herself, she opened it up by going swimming last May, I think.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, let's go back to the topic that we were starting to go down, and that was to talk about krill.
These huge factory ships go down to the Southern Ocean. They're from Norway, they're from Japan, they're from Russia. And why they go after krill is because, first of all, they can pull in an awful lot of it, and they're huge clouds, swarms of krill. They're little shrimp-like creatures, but they're the basic food for the whales and the penguins in the Southern Ocean. And they can go out and exploit literally millions of tons of this, and bring it on board the factory ships, and then it's converted into two things. First, it's a cheap protein paste to go to factory farms to feed chickens and to feed pigs, and also to feed salmon on salmon farms. So those are the three things that they're targeting, but also to make a krill oil vitamin supplement for health food stores.
The omega-3, right?
Yeah, they're telling them on that. But, I think we're destroying the ocean so somebody can get their omega-3. But it's a real problem for the populations of penguins, which penguin populations are being diminished, and it's through starvation. And so it has to be dealt with. Now, the organization Sea Shepherd that kicked me out, that is Sea Shepherd Global, they've gone down there 3 years in a row, and it's made me increasingly frustrated and actually quite embarrassed, because for the 3 years, all they've done is gone down and take pictures, and which something Greenpeace did in 2018, something National Geographic also did in 2018. And I'm going, what are you doing? Just taking pictures, and they actually had the audacity to call it Antarctic defense. So we have to go down there and redeem the name by doing an interventionist campaign. We have to intervene directly with their operations. We have to shut them down. And you don't do that by taking pictures.
So when will you be doing that?
At the end of the year, right after
Oh,
Brazil. Go from
Right
Brazil
after.
down there.
Okay.
Because be December, January, February, the best times to engage these vessels down there.
Is there no organization that can also intervene and prevent this or stop it?
We're looking to work with the Bob Brown Foundation in Australia, but probably they're about the only one. And they're a direct action organization. They're getting arrested all the time down there in Tasmania. But I'm working to getting executive directors to do another TV series to be called Krill Wars, to follow up on Whale Wars. So I need
Good.
8 executive directors, put $250,000 each in there. I've got 2 so far, so I just started. So that's it's looking good. And that it's okay to go down there and intervene and interfere and everything like that, but it's really important to have that operation dramatized and put on television so millions of people can see what's going on down there.
It has the greatest impact
Yeah.
of awareness raising.
Yeah, well, there's a difference between what we do and what have done with whale wars is that we don't go down and just document nature. We go down there and document our interventions to protect nature. And when I did whale wars, it's interesting that there's only 2 ways to really interfere there. One is to block their ability to load whales by blocking the slipway, which we did. The other one is to intervene against their refueling operations, and that was also very effective. But if you saw the show, we have water cannon fights, we have stink bombs. That I just put all that in for television. It doesn't really do anything, but it's entertaining, it's dramatic, and it got people's attention. But what the effective interventions were the blocking of the fueling and the loading of the whales.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So over that period of time, we managed to save 6,500 plus whales. And we know that number because that's how much they did not get in their quotas during those periods. So the last year I was down there on the 2012-2013 campaign, they only took 10% of their quota. So we're getting better every year on that. And that's one of the reasons that the Japanese came after me and issued a red notice. I didn't actually do anything. The charge is conspiracy to trespass. I mean, what does that even mean? And also obstructing business, but it's supposed to be a research whaling, but it's obstructing business. And I wasn't even there when the incident took place that they're charging me with. And the thing is it's all based on the fact that Pete Bethune's, he had a boat called the Adigilla. It wasn't my boat. He was working with us, but he wasn't under my authority. But his boat got cut in half and destroyed by a Japanese harpoon vessel with no legal consequences to the Japanese at all. So he boarded the vessel to confront the captain who had destroyed his boat, and they kidnapped him, took him to Japan, and charged him with trespassing and obstructing business. And he was in prison for 3 or 4 months, and then they made a deal with him. And the deal was, if you say that Paul Watson ordered you to do this, then we'll give you a suspended sentence, which is what he did. And he got a suspended sentence. When he was released, he then signed an affidavit saying he lied in order to get that suspended sentence. And John Kerry, a Secretary of the State, got that, and he said, "Oh yeah, well, this is ridiculous. You can come back home," which I did. But although I have to say that the year that I spent in exile in the South Pacific was kind of nice. I didn't mind being on all these deserted islands by myself, lots of wildlife and everything. But anyway, so the charge was obstructing business. Now, John Kerry said, "Yeah, well, there's no grounds for it," but the Japanese said, "We don't care. You're going to be charged, and that's it." But there's no evidence because the only evidence was this guy's statement. But that's all they have to go on. So I was, they didn't even attempt to arrest me during the time that I was in the United States. They never attempted to arrest me when I was in France and or Ireland. But when I went this time, because I stopped in Greenland, which is a Danish territory, and they're killing pilot whales and dolphins in the Faroe Islands, the Japanese went to the Danes and got them to put in the the enforcement. Now, here's the interesting thing: when we got into Greenland, 12 very heavily armed Danish policemen boarded the ship to arrest me. And I'm going, this is a little overkill. And then I found out why, because the Japanese described me in the Interpol Red Notice as an extremely dangerous armed eco-terrorist. And so that's how
I remember that.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so anyway, the good news on this is in April, the Interpol suspended that red notice pending an investigation into the political implications of it. And on June 24th, they were supposed to make a determination whether that would be permanent or not, but I haven't heard yet. But my lawyer said that's normal. These guys never do anything, quickly. But it's still right now. Until that is, it's a suspended sort of situation. But here's the other interesting thing is that a week ago, one of the people in Interpol who was actually involved with my case was arrested in the UAE for bribery. So
Really?
he was taking bribes either to not to remove the red notice or to make people put people on the red notice. So that all those cases had to be reviewed. And I don't really know where I fit in on that. But in 2017, there was a European Parliamentary Committee that cited my case as an example of political corruption and abuse in Interpol. Now, the other thing that happened is a couple of weeks ago was the arrest of a judge in Costa Rica, the judge who made the decision to not dismiss the Costa Rican red notice against me. And he was arrested. He's being extradited to the United States on drug trafficking charges. This is like a federal judge on the Costa Rican charges. So, I mean, you can see this kind of corruption that's involved in Japan's manipulations behind it. The Costa Rican red notice was dropped in 2017 with the change of government. And I actually got a call from the environment minister apologizing for that. But if you can drop it from the red notice on the change of government, that shows more than anything that it was politically motivated. It wasn't judicial.
I was going to ask you if this could be used again. So it sounds like it may have a permanent dismissal. Is that what you were saying?
Here's the problem. Yeah, we can get it permanently dismissed, but there's nothing to stop Japan from going to another country and saying we want a unilateral request for extradition. That's why I don't dare come back to the U.S. and as long as Trump's president, because he's very transactional. And he had a meeting with the Japanese prime minister. I don't know what they discussed, and people said, well, surely they're not going to be talking about you. But in January, the Japanese foreign minister called the Danish ambassador into his office in Tokyo to berate him and said that they were extremely disturbed that Denmark had betrayed Japan. And so if they're going to talk about me on the highest levels of the Japanese government, I can only assume there's a possibility that it was discussed with the U.S. government.
Yeah.
Paul, you're a little too popular.
Well, the amazing thing about it is at the time that I was in prison for 5 months, backfired on both Japan and Denmark because we turned it into a campaign. I always think you take every situation as an opportunity, and we turned this into a campaign to further expose Japan's illegal whaling operations, plus to expose the killing of pilot whales and dolphins in the Faroe Islands. And neither Japan nor Denmark really were prepared for the reaction on that, because interventions on my behalf from the President and Prime Minister of France, the President of French Polynesia, the President of Brazil, the Pope actually intervened. And what I found out from the Pope actually is his office is that Japan put an awful lot of pressure on the Vatican. Were making threats. They threatened Denmark with the cancellation of a $100 million windmill project. They threatened trade relations with France. All these threats were coming through. Plus, we got over 1 million signatures. Plus, interventions by,
celebrities.
Sylvia Earle and Jane Goodall, and so many others. That they weren't prepared for that. So what happened on December 17th? The Greenland court made the decision to extradite me. That was their decision. And the next day, the Attorney General for Denmark made the political decision to release me. So, needless to say, Japan was not happy.
Yeah. So they still have a bee in their bonnet, so to speak.
Yeah, the Japanese hold grudges. I hate to generalize, but just looking at, I've studied Japanese history and they hold grudges, on a governmental level. I'm not talking about the people. I'm talking about the government tends to hold grudges. And and what I did, my real crime was they want retribution for a television show that embarrassed them.
And they're still actively whaling, and they have that enormous whale processing ship that had just come out, I believe, last year? Is that still being used?
They built that for the Southern Ocean. They're saying that it's not for the Southern Ocean, it's for coastal whaling. You don't build a ship like that for coastal whaling. That's a long-range vessel that can carry an extremely amount of cargo. And it's also, they covered the top so nobody can actually fly drones to see what's going on. And they've outfitted it with water cannons and other defensive things. This thing was set up to defend itself from us, which is a little flattering that they did that.
Yeah.
But they spent $60 million to build this ship. And there's no money in whaling. It hasn't made any money for decades. But the reason, I'll tell you the reason why it goes on. It's got nothing to do with whale meat at all. Less than 1% of the Japanese public eats whale meat. It goes on because the company that goes whaling is owned by the government of Japan, and its board of directors are 12 ex-politicians who get six-figure salaries for sitting on that board. And this is an industry the government subsidizes to about $35 million a year. And that now the other reason is that the union that provides the crew for the ship is a Yakuza controlled union or Japanese mafia controlled union. They have a lot of influence with the government. So it carries on because of corruption. And, that's the only reason that is, it has no economic benefit at all. It's the same with the Canadian seal hunt. Canada's official quota is 400,000 seals, but they kill 40,000. They only take 10%. The reason for that, there's no market. That was a really successful campaign on ours. We fought it from 75 on until 2008 when the Europe banned seal pelts, China banned seal pelts. So what they do is they kill 40,000 seals and store the pelts in warehouses. You won't believe the name of the place in Newfoundland. It's called Dildo, Newfoundland. But that's where they store them and subsidize it to about 20 million a year. And the only reason that they do that is for political reasons, to keep the Newfoundlanders happy, because the Newfoundlanders have this bizarre idea that seals are eating all their fish. And if we don't kill the seals, we're going to run out of fish. Now, I have to point out to them, 500 years ago, there were about 45 million seals in the North Atlantic Ocean, and now there's less than 7 million. So it wasn't the seals that killed off the fish; it was the commercial fisheries. And and also, if you want the fish to come back, you need seals, you need whales, because there's a relationship between prey and predator there. Because we think that the seals eat the cod, but they don't. They eat the halibut, the ulakan, and the herring. They eat the fish that eat the small young cod. And it keeps everything, after millennium, nature keeps all this stuff in balance. We come in like pretending to know what we're doing when we never do, and that's what upsets the whole apple cart.
That is so accurate about, if we leave nature to itself, it knows how to keep balance of all these populations, and it is our interference with it that's destroying it, actually.
We've been talking today with Captain Paul Watson of the Captain Paul Watson Foundation, a lifelong environmental activist and former star of Whale Wars. He talked about a new TV series that they are putting together called The Krill Wars. You were hearing from also Teresa or Tree Mercer of the Mendonoma Whale and Seal Study that she started with her husband Scott. And the two of them and I, Leanne Lindsay, created this show, Resilient Earth Radio and Podcast, to bring you critical issues facing our planet and the positive actions people are taking, like Captain Paul Watson. And now back to Tree as she finishes up her comment.
I actually was not aware that most of the whaling efforts were all this corruption. And I was still assuming that there was a market for whale meat and blubber, but apparently not. That's so interesting.
Well, Iceland actually, for the last 10 years, or for Iceland's, Lofson had lost about 1 million a year on that, but he's wealthy. He does this because he wants to do it. He doesn't do it for money and that. So in Norway, it's all subsidized. All these things are subsidized. So that's the only. But then again,
subsidized by the countries themselves, like Norway
and it's even worse than that, because worldwide, commercial industrialized fishing operations exist because of about $90 billion in government subsidies from the EU through all these Australia. All these countries are subsidizing the commercial fishing operation because otherwise it couldn't survive. In order to extract fish from the ocean, you need such sophisticated technology and such incredibly big ships that, you got 100 million euro factory ships are out there. You've got 100-mile long lines, 100-mile long gill nets. You've got giant purse seine nets. You got these. We pulled one gill net from the Southern Ocean that was 2 kilometers deep. It took 200 hours to pull it up. It was 72 kilometers long and weighed 70 tons, and that was one net from one ship.
70 tons.
Yeah. So, this is the kind of thing we're dealing with here. At any given time, there's enough long lining and gill nets set to go around the planet 60 times.
Oh,
And that's one of the things that we're also involved with is, cleaning up marine debris. And I would say 60% of all the marine debris is fishing gear.
fishing gear. Yep.
And plastics.
Yeah,
And of course, all the fishing gear is plastic.
that's right. It's made
Right.
of plastic. Much
But
of it is.
I try to remind people because I was raised in a fishing village in Eastern Canada in the 50s and 60s. And I could walk the beach there for miles and never see one speck of plastic back then. So this is all a real new thing. I think plastic's really a design failure. Nobody really thought it through when they came up with it. Because back then, my town was actually the world's largest lobster fishery town, and all the lobster traps were made of wood and hemp. So if they were lost, they just biodegraded. We didn't have nylon fishing lines and things like that. So you didn't have that kind of problem.
Well, back to Tree's point about the habits of a nation, if it's historical, societal, maybe just the way that the food that they might eat, does that still play a part in some of these things? Like, I remember watching that documentary by Richard Ladkani about the vaquita and the sea shepherd several years back. Is that still driving any of the demand?
Well, yeah, I mean, first, the Japanese like to say that this is a traditional thing, but it isn't. There's about two towns in Japan that killed whales, only two towns. It wasn't a national thing. So when they say it's part of our tradition, it's not true. The interesting thing about it, it was part of the tradition of the Ainu people. The Ainu people are the Aboriginal inhabitants of Japan. They're actually Caucasians. In fact, they're the origin where Hungarians and Finns come from, originally from there. But the Ainu people were whalers. Japan outlawed them and forbids Ainu whaling. So Aboriginal whaling in Japan is forbidden. And so now they tell what they're doing. They're saying that that's Aboriginal whaling when it's not Aboriginal at all. So we have so many, like, and the Norwegians, they don't make any money on it at all. It's just subsidized. Everybody subsidizes it. Now, the one place where tradition is the main reason is the Faroe Islands, where they kill pilot whales and dolphins, kill everything that shows up, really. Because, well, their father did it, their great father did it, their great great grandfather, Vikings did it, so we're going to do it. And that's kind of thing. And, but they don't, there's no money to be made in it. It's totally non-commercial. But everybody gets involved in it. The kids get involved in it. They expose the kids to it. So if they cite a pot of pilot whales, everybody quits work. Everybody goes out of school to go down to the beach to kill as many as they possibly can. And I remember confronting the Prime Minister of the Faroe Islands back in 1986. And I said to him, why are you doing this? He says, it's a gift from God. I said, what do you mean it's a gift from God? God gave, I said, look, it says in the Bible, in Leviticus, you can't eat anything out of the ocean that doesn't have scales. So therefore, it's an abomination to, if because we're a very Christian nation, it's an abomination to. And he said, God made an exemption for us. But the pilot whale meat is unedible. It's so contaminated with heavy metals, especially methyl mercury. It's unedible. In fact, the children
Mercury, right.
Children of the Faroe Islands have the highest level of mercury in their bodies of any children anywhere on the planet. The doctors in the Faroe Islands are the world's experts on mercury poisoning because of this. People are only allowed to, they say no pregnant women, no children should eat it, but they do. And the adult men should only eat, and women should only eat 200 grams a month. Well, of course they don't, and you take the number of whales they kill and look at the number of people in the population, and aside the fact that less than 40% of them eat whale meat, what happens to all that whale meat? They throw it away. They dump it. And we've documented that dumping carcasses. We see hundreds of rotting carcasses on the floor, sea floor. They just throw them away. They kill because they want to kill. That's the only reason for it. It's a blood sport.
Right.
It's their only, I guess they're very bored people, but at the same time, They're these very nationalistic, we are Faroese and nobody's going to tell us what to do, and that it's the same thing. But we live in a world where the bullfighting has been banned in Mexico. It's been banned in Barcelona. Fox hunting has been banned in the UK. These kind of blood sports have no place in the 21st century.
No, they don't. Not any place at all. I agree. Sickening.
Let's talk about what is coming up next for your crew, for the Captain Paul Watson Foundation, for Sea Shepherd France. What's on the agenda for the John Paul de Joria?
Well, we're working in cooperation with Sea Shepherd France and Sea Shepherd Brazil. And in next week, the boat's leaving from Marseille, where it is right now, to go to off of Greece and Italy to go after poachers and also to check out illegal taking of bluefin tuna. So they'll be doing that. And after that, we'll be heading to French Guiana and then to Brazil. And in Brazil, Sea Shepherd is working there in the Amazon to protect river dolphins and manatees. So that's an ongoing project. This month, I'm going to Mayotte, which is a French territorial island off the coast of Mozambique. And we're going there. We've got a crew there full time to stop poaching of turtles on that. It's a big, big problem. And it's actually, we got a really good arrangement with the French government on this, because most of the people who work with us, the volunteers who work with us, are illegal immigrants coming from the Comoros or from Mozambique or Madagascar, I mean. So they come over there, and we've actually got them under some sort of protection. So if we tell the police, they're working with us. They're working to and that's so we've got a house we've rented for the people who are doing this, and it's had a real big impact. So we've cut down on the poaching quite a bit.
Oh, that's good.
Why is it you have to go after the poachers and not the government?
Good question. Because the police, there's actually a government department that's supposed to deal with it, but they don't do it. They just don't do it. It's like when I was working in the Galapagos, the Galapagos Rangers, we give them a boat, we do all this thing, but they're not interested in doing their job. They're just interested in getting paid.
Oh,
And at the same time, a lot of them are just bribed, to turn and look the other way. It's a real problem. I just don't trust most government agencies there's no enthusiasm there. I've always said that, you can't pay people to do what volunteers do.
true.
Hmm.
Very true. The volunteers have passion and yeah.
Of that, yeah, it's true. It's
You have a large organization. The Captain Paul Watson Foundation has lots of chapters.
but it's not that large.
Really?
Well,
It seems like it
It
is.
took me 50 years to build up Sea Shepherd. So when they took the ships, they took the assets, they took the membership, they took all that stuff. So I had nothing. It was only because I had the support of people like John Paul de Joria and others who, longtime supporters. And people, when they find out what happens, they come and they support us.
Yeah.
But they control access to everything. So, you can't make a comment on their socials. It's blocked, it's deleted. They completely control the information on that. I think the thing that bothers me most about it is that they completely betrayed our principles. And the main principle being that of aggressive nonviolence, to aggressively intervene. And I know when I was dismissed from them in 2022, the reason being I was too controversial and I was too confrontational, and they wanted to go mainstream. We got plenty of mainstream organizations, didn't need another one. But I think it had a lot to do with the fact that these guys, who I had known for some of them up to 20 years, had suddenly, now they had, because of whale wars, they had nice paying jobs and job security.
Mhm.
And that became more important than the work to do. They offered me $300,000 a year to not do anything, to not give any talks, don't talk to journalists, don't give any lectures, and don't write any books. We'll give you $300,000 a year just to be a figurehead. And I said no. And when I said no, and in fact, actually, what happened at the board meeting was I said, look, I can't support this, because they had maneuvered me off the board because of the red notice and everything. And that once I was maneuvered off, they put all sorts of new people on there and dismissed anybody who supported me. And I said, I can't support this. And the chairman there, he looks at me and he says, and I hate to say, but his exact words, so he says, you're a fucking employee. You do what you're told.
Mm.
Well, let me ask you about the John Paul DeJoria. They were painting some names on the ship from certain donors. I know we're hoping to see Resilient Earth Radio and podcast up there.
We have a great artist, and she's putting everybody's names on the wall. Her name's Adele. So that project's finished. Your name would be up there right now. I'll get them to send you a picture.
That'd be
and
cool.
But the John Paul DeJoria is doing fine. It's a former Scottish fisheries patrol boat. But the other ship that we have, the Banderos, even more interesting because
Right.
we bought that from the Japanese, and they didn't know they were selling it to us. They were pretty
Love
upset.
it.
Found out they did. They not only sold it to us, they delivered it to Korea to us, and so that vessel's now in Australia. But this is the second time I've done that. I bought the Sam Simon from them back in 2011, I think. So they fell for the trick twice.
Are there any last words that you would like to say to our audience?
That everybody should has an obligation and responsibility to make sure that we protect life diversity and interdependence of species in the ocean, because the reality is if the ocean dies, we die, because our entire existence depends upon a healthy ocean. And the other thing I tried to get across, and I just wrote a children's book about this, is we all live in the ocean, because the ocean is not just the sea, it's the water planet. It's water in constant circulation. So sometimes it's in the sea, sometimes in ice, sometimes underground, sometimes in the clouds, and sometimes in the cells of every living plant and animal on the planet. That water is constantly moving through all those different mediums. So the water in your body right now, which about 70% of your body, was once recently in ice or in the sea or in the clouds or in the body of an elephant or of a redwood tree or whatever. It's constantly moving. So when I ask children, what is the ocean? And the answer is, we are the ocean. This is the ocean planet. Everything here is the ocean.
Right.
The ocean planet and interdependence. I
Yeah,
think
only
that
because we're land animals, we call it the earth, but otherwise it should be the planet ocean.
Yes.
agreed.
Me too.
Agreed. More awareness too. That seems like that just a small amount of 2D land living people seem to forget this is a blue marble when you look at it from space.
Yeah.
It's mostly ocean. So thank you so much for that, Captain Paul, and best wishes on your future journeys and efforts, and for being right where you are right now, right across from the Louvre. That is tremendous.
Oh, thank you.
Wonderful.
And
Good for your
say hello
time.
to Lamia for us.
Will do. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Resilient Earth podcast, where we talk about critical issues and positive actions for our planet. Resilient Earth is produced by Planet Centric Media, a 501c3 nonprofit, and Seastorm Studios, Inc., located on the rugged North Sonoma coast of Northern California. I'm Leanne Lindsay, producer and host, along with co-hosts and co-producers Scott and Tree Mercer of Mendonoma Whale and Seal Study, located on the South Mendocino and North Sonoma coasts. The music for this podcast is by Eric Alleman, an international composer, pianist, and writer living in the Sea Ridge. Discover more of his music, animations, ballet, stage, and film work at ericalleman.com. You can find Resilient Earth on Spotify, Apple, and Amazon podcasts, iHeartRadio, YouTube, SoundCloud, and wherever you find your podcasts. Please support us by subscribing or donating to our cause.